Jackie is going to talk to us today about how she got into product management and what her favorite things are about PM. Before Asana, Jackie, you spent some time at Microsoft, right, as well as Google, both places you were PM as well?
Yep. Yeah, I started PMing right out of college, and I worked at Microsoft for 3 years on the SharePoint product, and at Google for 3 years on data APIs and on Google Search, working on local images and video universal. So making sure that when you did a search on Google, that you got back the right results for you, no matter what the type was.
Okay, nice. So you really have, though, a breadth of experience, I think, that none of the people that we've talked to yet really have in terms of Google, Microsoft, and now Asana being one of the hottest startups in the Valley right now. So really excited to chat. But I mean, you started getting to it. You said that you got into PM right after school. So I'm curious, did you really do anything before product management in terms of, I mean, or since you were PM straight out of school, was this always your destiny and your path?
Mm-hmm. So in college, I majored in computer science and economics, and I always thought that growing up I was going to do some non-computer science job, but be the smart person in the office who knew how to use computers and could write scripts and get things done really quickly. I didn't expect to end up in technology, and someone I knew recommended the Microsoft Program Manager internship to me. And so I applied having no idea what it was. I was a sophomore in college. I didn't think I could do a job with the word manager in the title. And when I got to the interview, I didn't know what a PM was, and I basically figured out through the course of an interview and by the questions they were asking me what a PM would actually be expected to do.
Nice. Talk about learning on your feet, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so you seem to have known pretty early on, and so I guess that was your first gig was at Microsoft. So then, in terms of how you got your first PM job, was it simply you applied and you went through a conventional interview process? Were there other surprises to it or anything unusual about how you did get that first PM job?
Yeah, I think for me it was a pretty standard right out of school path. So I applied for the internship my sophomore year, and did a phone interview, was flown out on site, did a day full of interviews, and then ended up with an internship on the SharePoint team. At the end of my first summer, I decided I wanted to go back to the same team so I didn't have to interview again. And then at the end of my second summer, when I was looking for a full-time job, I decided I still wanted to be on the same team, so I did a really short interview loop and then joined the team right out of college.
Okay, cool. So this next question might be a little bit harder since, I don't know, you've done PM at so many different places. Can you tell us about a typical day for you, either as a PM at Asana or if you have some sort of collage of a day from all your different PM experiences, or even a week if that's more suitable?
Yeah, and I'm sure you'll hear this from everyone, but a typical day varies a lot depending on where in the product lifecycle you are. So I'd say that at any point in the product lifecycle, there's always ongoing things that I do as a PM. So for example, I'm always triaging bugs. I'm always looking at the bugs that came in, checking to see if they're high priority, if we should stop what we're doing and fix them now, or decide when they should be fixed later on, sometimes doing some investigation around that. I'm always talking to the designers, looking at their designs, giving them feedback on them, and generally being responsive and staying in touch with everybody on the team to make sure that I'm handling things as they come up. So as a PM, you fight a lot of fires, and a lot of times you'll have a day when the thing that came in from a very casual comment ends up being the thing you spend all day on, because it turns out that it actually is a sign of something much deeper that you need to look into. So that's part of it, is sort of the ongoing things, but then depending where you are in the product lifecycle, at the very beginning, I'll be thinking about, for our next quarter, what are the main themes we want to go after? What are the big projects we want to take on? I'll usually start by writing out a short document. I call them proposals, or sometimes discussion documents. They're or sometimes even specs, but they aren't really exactly what we're going to build. It's much more about thinking about the problems and the goals and the use cases. And so I'll really lay out the motivation for what we're trying to build and what we're trying to accomplish, and then sometimes some straw man proposal along with those. And then I send that around for discussion, for iteration, and a lot of times questions will come up because of that. And so a lot of what I do as a PM is saying, well, here's this obvious idea we wanted to do, but it exposed all these questions, and then I'll figure out how are we going to answer those questions. And sometimes that's user research, sometimes that's looking at the metrics, sometimes that's talking to sales. And so basically figuring out how do we solve the problem, how do we answer the questions that we want to answer to be able to move forward. I guess, and then later on in the cycle, there's the working with designers, and then once things are actually in implementation, dog fooding, which means like using your product internally every day and being your first customer. So putting yourself in the shoe of a target customer, trying to use your features, and then finding out where are all the rough edges, and then prioritizing those improvements before it gets launched. And then, of course, once it gets launched, looking at all the metrics and making adjustments from there.
Yeah, there's a ton in there. One side question I had for you that was really something that stood out to me. You mentioned, so there's all the day-to-day stuff and the ongoing, and then there's figuring out where you should be going in the long run or what to work on in the next quarter. Do you have any special tips for either aspiring PMs or current PMs, for that matter, about how to actually manage that? Because I think a lot of people get stuck in the weeds with, either minor, like there's the whole local maximum problem with products, but also just when you're fighting fires constantly, it seems like a lot of people struggle to really see the bigger picture and get their heads above water. Is there anything that you've learned over the years that's been really effective to manage that sort of balance?
Yeah, I would say two things. The first one, and I learned this probably during my second year as a PM, was somebody recommended that I read Getting Things Done by David Allen, and it definitely changed how organized I was. For me, the real key trick there was realizing to write everything down and to do anything that took less than 2 minutes right away so that it didn't build up. And once I started following that practice, I was able to get through all my emails, respond to people the same day that they emailed me, and not have just keeping on top of things and being a major part of my job. So I definitely recommend that book to everyone.
Okay.
And another thing that I did that was really helpful was I wrote down the different types of work that I do, and I've got this on a Quora post, thinking about how much of my time ideally do I want to spend doing project management, customer feedback, thinking about long-term goals. And then for a week I tracked what I was actually spending my time on. And then being able to see the difference between what I was spending too much time on and what I was spending not enough time on, I was able to make adjustments there.
Okay, that's smart. It seems like a great idea, but you've actually had the diligence to follow through and do that sort of thing so you can be effective. It seems like people really struggle to execute on that sometimes. All right, cool. So you do all these things, and the PM job has so much going on. What do you like the most about being a product manager?
Mm-hmm. So in some ways I feel like I was always a product manager. Even when I was little, before I knew the job existed, if we were in the car waiting to pay our tolls, I'd be thinking about how they could reorganize the whole system to make it more efficient. If I'm using my remote control and having trouble hitting the buttons, I would think about how you could design a better remote control. So one thing I love is just that I get to do this as a job, and that the thing that I've always enjoyed doing is actually a job. And then I guess more specifically, I love launching successful products. I love having a successful launch when you've worked so hard and it all adds up together, and you see how all of the places where you were careful and planned ahead and did customer research, I get to see it all play out, and then get to hear feedback from real customers, and that's really satisfying.
Yeah, is there a particular time you remember, either during customer development or after a launch, that you spoke to somebody who used one of the many products that you've worked on that stands out in memory of like, oh my God, what I work on every day changes this person's life in X or Y way?
I was pretty excited when I heard from my dad that he talked to an old friend from college who's now working on artificial vision, like an eye that will manually see things, and that he was using Asana. And he didn't hear about it through me or my dad. He had on his own discovered this, and then he was helping him to do like a mechanical eye, which I think is a pretty awesome thing to bring into the world.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. It's like one thing if somebody just uses their product, or your product in this case, in a very sort of expected way, or in a very, I don't know, I mean, it's great when people use the product for what it's intended for in a small way, but when somebody's doing something as incredible as that, and you're aiding that process, I'm sure that is a good feeling for you, right? Cool. All right. So then, you're writing a book about how to crack the PM interview, and I'm sure you've thought a lot about and had to give a lot of advice over the years to people who've wanted to move into product management, and it's certainly a hot job right now, given sort of tech is super hot right now. Startups are, on the tops of a lot of people's minds. So, if it's possible to boil down into sort of the best or most impactful advice you would give to an aspiring PM, what would it be?
Mm-hmm. So I thought a little about this, and there's three pieces of advice, which might not be the best advice, but they're the three that really stand out for me. And so the first one is about being customer focused. And I think that a lot of times people understand the concept of being customer focused, but they don't go far enough. So I think if you're thinking about your customer and you're thinking about their goals, always try to go one step farther. So when I was at Google and I worked on place search, you could think that our customer's goal is to find a restaurant, but you can actually take it a step further and think that their goal is to discover a new place that they can impress their friends by introducing them to an awesome restaurant that they hadn't heard of before. So the really surface level goal was to find a restaurant, but their deeper goal was to impress their friends and have that satisfying experience. And if you think a little bit deeper about what your customers are trying to accomplish and why they're taking the actions that they're taking, you can sometimes come up with an experience that works a lot better for them. The second piece of advice would be for people who are new on their teams. And I think when you're new on your team, it's important to be helpful at the very beginning. So a lot of people come into a new team and the team doesn't really want to have a PM. They maybe are a little bit cranky from the last PM they had. And so it's really important when you're new on a team to make a good first impression, and immediately show your team that you can be helpful, that you can be a multiplier on their productivity. And so a lot of times the first project you'll take on won't feel like a really PM-like project. You might be manually entering data from a piece of paper that they needed for their data source, or you might be recording training videos, or you might be answering customer support tickets. But if you find something where there was a real need at the very beginning that the team needed and you can fill that in for them, it really helps build up that initial trust and credibility and gets you off onto the right foot with your team. And then the third piece of advice, sorry to give three, but PMs tend to think in threes, is to become the expert on your area. So when I was a new PM, I kind of saw myself as a communication conduit. So a person would ask a question, and I'd find the right engineer, and then I'd connect them, and I would let all the questions kind of pass through me, connecting people to the right places. But then I learned that to be a really successful PM and a really helpful PM, what you want to do is become the expert in your area and do all of the research that it takes until you know your area better than anyone else, and then form a point of view on where you think your team should be going. And that's how you really take PMing to the next level and become a driving force on your team and help your team be more successful.
Yeah, that's a great point. I feel like so many people get caught up with just keeping people happy that sometimes they forget to have their own opinion about things. And if the PM's not doing that, then nobody else's job really requires them to do it. So who knows what could happen then sometimes with the product. But anyway, this was great. Is there anything that you'd like to add? We'll definitely get your Twitter handle up there. We'll get your Quora, a couple of your most popular posts maybe, as well as your handle. Is there any other advice that you would give, or any resources?
So for the book that's coming out, Cracking the PM Interview, it's at crackingthepminterview.com, and you can sign up to get an email when it's ready.
I'm going to end the broadcast, but if you could hang on for just a sec, Jackie, and we'll wrap up, and then we'll go from there.
Cool.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think the broadcast is, as you can tell, I'm still getting used to this whole when you end the broadcast, and I assumed it would end the call completely the first time I did that, but how did you feel? I think that went really well. I appreciate you taking the time again.
Yeah, it was nice. I think you've got some good questions in there. I'll be excited to see what other people say.
Yeah, totally. Cool. So then, like I said, it just processes and stuff on YouTube once the call's over. So I'll send you the link probably later today, and then you can take a look and let me know if there's anything to edit out or anything like that.